Hi,
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, great, thanks.
You're very perky for this hour.
I'm definitely a morning person. I've been up since I've got three young kiddies, so I've been up since five. So I'm ready to go. I've been in the office for an hour or two.
Oh my God, that's so good. I actually woke up early to do all of my most stressful tasks, and I'm pleased to report I've achieved all of them.
Good. What was your number one most stressful task?
Well, because I've got a lot of really big projects on this week from my gyms, who are, of course, pivoting at the moment, as we all know.
Yes, absolutely they are.
Yeah, but it means that my easier clients, I haven't had a chance to pitch yet. So I woke up this morning and remembered that one of them hasn't had a hit yet. And I need to get 2 hits on every client every week.
Of course.
So anyway, I achieved it in about 5 minutes because the girl happened to be in America. So she responded to me immediately. So I'm just like, all right,
So
no
good. So
stress.
good. So good.
All right. Well, without further ado, I will introduce you to everyone so they know what we're doing. So today our guest is Richard Bell, who not only sits on the board of 6 different companies, but is also the founder of Business Leaders, a multi-million-dollar private advisory and investment firm with 7 businesses under their banner. One of those is FitStop, which I'm sure is quite relatable to a few people who follow me. Um, Business leaders both start up their own companies, but they also invest in others as well. So in addition to that, Rich is also a very popular consultant due to his history of creating successful businesses, but also exiting them successfully as well, which is a big one. And as a result, he's sought after by a number of big companies, hence why he is on the board of 6. But more recently, he's created the Business Leaders Group, so startups can get access to you as well, which we will discuss soon. But Rich, let's start with, can you talk about the current market and the challenges that businesses are facing at the moment?
Yeah, of course, of course. Thank you, Britt, for having me on. I think it's really cool that you're doing this and allowing people to start the conversation and stay connected during this time. So, well done for doing this, first of all. Hey, from a market perspective at the moment, it's super interesting in the fact that I think there's a couple of different categories, right? You've got the category, of people and business owners that are kind of running scared, bunkering down, cutting all their expenses out and almost thinking the world is over. And hey, in some cases that absolutely might be true. And then you've got, I guess, the other category, which are, looking at taking advantage of some of the opportunities that could be in this market, et cetera. And my kind of take on that is what I'm seeing in the market is this is the same for everyone. Now, of course, there's some industries that have been hurt, including some of the industries I'm involved with, hurt a lot more than other industries. However, I think right now, without kind of sounding too kind of woo-woo about it, it's like I think it's really important to look as business leaders how we actually respond to that, because there's challenges in the market all the time, whether that is, travel restrictions, companies innovating, tech replacing different businesses, automation taking place. So it just so happens that this thing called COVID-19 has kind of shocked us into thinking about some different ways that we may be able to do business. So my kind of advice or what I'm seeing in the market is it's tough for everyone. If I talk about Fitstop, one of our companies, a company that started with a guy called Peter Hole, who's the CEO of that business back in 2017. That, like, we lost 100% of our revenue overnight. Literally overnight. In 12 hours, gyms were shut. We've got about 70 franchises around Australia now, and that was obviously devastating. And there was kind of two ways that we could have responded to that. It was either like, wow, okay, well, let's put our head in the sand and the world's over and let's kind of stop for 6 months, or the other way to look at that. And by the way, neither are right or wrong. It's just kind of how we look at it. Another way to look at that is, well, hang on a minute. What's the opportunities there? How can we pivot the business? How can we work on a different business model? So you would have noticed that we just completely rebranded Fitstop, which was in the pipeline. We kind of made that happen really quickly, and then we launched our our new mobile app, which is Fit Stop at Home, that actually launches today. So,
Oh, great.
within sort of 14 days, we've completely pivoted the business to being a 100% online company. And again, it's like back to the overarching principle there. It's like it's really easy to put your head in the sand and kind of just wait for this to pass. Or the other way to look at it is go, well, hang on, what can I do? How can I innovate? How can I do things differently? How can I offer different products, different services? Because the reality of it is, in times like this, there are still businesses that do really well.
Yeah.
And there are businesses that will, unfortunately, not be here in 6 months. Now, my personal belief is that is very much dependent on how the leader is running that company and what they are thinking about, what products and services they're doing, and how quickly they are innovating. If everyone just stopped and stood still and said, well, you know what, it's over because our current business model can't happen anymore, then absolutely, it'll be a horrific time. But if you can innovate, if you can think differently, if you can look at different products, different services, different ways to deliver things, different online platforms, then you may have an opportunity to come through this period that we're going through.
Absolutely. Well, you have absolutely answered my next two questions. But one of them was, from a personal perspective, what's some of your challenges that you're going through at the moment, and how are you getting around them? But do you have anything more to add to that, or is
well, obviously with Business Leaders Group, we're Business Leaders Group is the overarching kind of firm that has ownership stakes and different clients all around the world. So, normally for me personally, I mean, my business model from an advisory and an investment standpoint, a lot of it is face to face. I mean, last year I was on 240 flights. So, we do business across Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, China, Russia, France,
Wow.
Indonesia. So, for me, it's been incredibly hard. It's absolutely given us a massive shakeup. And obviously an example of, some of those businesses are like FitStop, but, that stopped overnight. One of the global boards that I chair is a company called AJ Hackett. They're an adventure tourism business. So they're in 6 countries around the world. Obviously tourism isn't kind of working right now.
No.
So, it's impacted me personally significantly from things like that. But then, of course, there's some other businesses that I'm involved with. Like I chair the board for a company called the National Business Review, which is almost like New Zealand's version of the Australian Financial Review. And that's booming right now. I mean, their online subscribers have grown by 500 in the last 6 days. Because people want access to business news and business media. So, I think. I think that it's different businesses are going to experience different situations, but I can say that in some businesses and the head company, we've lost 80% of our revenue. And then in some, we've doubled our revenue. So it's I think it's industry and sector dependent. But as I said, you've got to look at how we can innovate, how we can move through it, how we can cut costs that we don't need right now. And there's a lot of opportunities out there in the marketplace, which I'm happy to talk through soon.
Awesome. Well, going on to the next question then, moving on from the COVID-19, for businesses who are looking to grow, can you tell us a little bit about your Business Leaders Group and what are some of the things you'd tell them?
Yeah, of course. So, Leaders Club was interesting. It was an idea by my wife. Actually, we were having a coffee on one Sunday morning, and we were talking about the future of the business and the firm and what we were going to do, and and one of the things that I spoke about that I guess personally was missing was really working with that early stage business, sort of $0 to $2 million in revenue. Because a lot of my time, either in my own companies or the global boards that I was, being involved with were really large kind of scale companies, with between, 1 to 500 staff. So, you know, for me, it was Leaders Club was born out of a passion to work with, you know, early stage entrepreneurs, which I've always, you know, worked with them throughout my career, but I hadn't for the last couple of years. So Leaders Club was an idea where we said, right, why don't we get 12 businesses together? I'll pick 12 businesses to work with on an annual basis. They will come into a boardroom every single month. In that boardroom, we'll cover off on topics from sales to marketing to capital raising to my personal experiences, mindset, leadership, management, product to market fit, you know, exiting, all of that kind of stuff, right? So it's like a condensed version of everything I've learned over the last 10 years into a boardroom. And so we'd cover a little bit of that content, and then they'd have an opportunity to have a Q&A with me for an hour and a half about anything they're struggling with in business right now. And then at the end of that, they actually fill out what I call a one-page performance plan, which is telling me what they're going to do in the next 30 days. And then they go off into their businesses and they come back and sit in the boardroom, and then they're held accountable to, you know, what they should have done. So that's what Leaders Club is, and I'm really enjoying that. I've got a great group of companies I'm working with at the moment, but probably the three things that have come out of that, which have been really cool, is I think the first thing that any kind of small business or growth stage company needs to start thinking about is the business needs to operate.
You're frozen. Mm-hmm.
So many
There
of
we go.
the businesses that, yes, no, we're all good. Yeah, so many of the businesses I see, people are not building it like a business. They're building it like almost like a sole trader or a subcontractor, right? You've got to build the business like a business model, so it operates eventually without you. You know, because it's not, if it's requiring you to be there 100% of the time to, you know, do the invoicing, make the coffee, call the client, do everything that you've got to be able to do, you've actually just put yourself in a probably really stressful job, and you may as well not have started a business, right? So you've got to be looking at, how do I build a business model that actually works without me, is the first thing you need to be looking at. Now, that's not going to happen straight away, but that is fundamentally the principle of a business. It's creating the idea, putting the right people in place, stepping back so that you can be that leader and drive that vision and drive where you're going. Like, example with FitStop, you know, I co-founded that in 2017. That has a full-time CEO who's my other co-founder. I obviously sit on the board as a director and co-founder and chair that business, but it runs without me. If I didn't go there for 2 weeks, it would still work, right? So I think that's the first lesson. The second lesson is, under $1 million in revenue, 80% of your time needs to be spent on revenue generating activities, right? Like, you need to pop up as soon as you can. The amount of entrepreneurs and business owners I see who are kind of tinkering around with the product and making sure everything's perfect, wrong. You need to be driving hard for the first $1 million in revenue. 80% of your time needs to be spent on revenue generating activities, because once you get that pop, you'll have enough income to be able to sustain the business. Then you can work on tweaking the product and, you know, refining things, etc. Right? Go to market with something first, because that first $1 million in revenue, or those first group of customers, they will give you the feedback to be able to tweak your product, refine your product, and it will obviously change from the first time you launch it. Like, launch when you're not ready. Don't sit there and try and make something perfect and then launch, because you'll suck up all your money and you will not build a sustainable business. The third thing, and then I'll let you ask another question. The third thing there is, so as I said, build a business so it doesn't, you know, so it works without you. 80% of your time should be spent on revenue generating activities. And the third thing is, get the right people around you. You know, I cannot stress this enough. Like, there are so many business coaches out there, and I've got a huge amount of respect for people that, you know, want to teach people stuff. That's great. But get your yourself around business people. Get yourself around people who have gone through the journey. Get yourself around someone who has built companies, scaled companies, and actually can give you that advice and show you what they did, not what they learned or what they heard about, what they did, because they're very different. The theory of business versus the practicality of business are very, very different. So I can remember, for the last, I left school at a really young age, but my entire journey, I have surrounded myself with successful business people and successful mentors, not who spend their time coaching people, but who actually have companies and who have built companies and can help me along that way. And I encourage any early stage business owner to do that. There's no point hanging around with people who are on the same level as you, because you're not going to learn anything. And I say that with total respect.
Oh my God. So I'm doing two things wrong and we need to have a meeting. Out of interest, how much is the Business Leaders Group to be a part of it?
Yeah, Leaders Club was honestly not about the money. It's $900 a month. It's fully catered. You get all your food all day. You also get a fortnightly call with me if you've got any questions, so I can hold you accountable and check in. It's $9.97 a month. So we'll be launching another one really soon. But the current Leaders Club is actually full. But I will be launching another one at some stage.
Well, do let me know, because
I will.
am way too active in my business and I don't do any revenue raising activity at all.
Okay, well, hey, listen, it's not a bad thing that you're active because you're passionate, but you've just got to learn to let go a little bit and put the right systems and infrastructure and people in place.
Exactly. Well, I've got good people. I do have good people.
That's a good thing.
So, when you are looking for someone to work with, or if someone approaches you and wants to work with you, be it in a coaching perspective or getting investment from you, what should they have ready? Like, what do you look for?
Yeah, great question. I think there's the first thing I'm going to say, and this just goes without, this is a universal principle without fail, and that is, for me, I've always backed the owner or the entrepreneur, right? So yes, the business model is important, but for me, having worked with so many companies now, I can see that, from the early stage to when a company scales, the business is often very different, including the business model. So I don't get that attracted to the business model and how good the idea is, because that will change over time. That always does, whether the tech changes or the idea or the market or the product or services. So for me, the first step is backing the entrepreneur or backing the business owner and going, you know what, I reckon that you've got the right, you've got the right attitude, you've got the right mindset, you've sacrificed, and I reckon that I can see myself working with you. And that's the first thing, because if we can't work together and there's not that commitment there from that founder or that entrepreneur, then it's not going to work. So I most of the time I'm looking for the individual human. The second thing I'm looking for is, of course, from a business model and a commercial perspective, I'm looking at, well, what sector are they playing in? How big is that market? What is the opportunity? What is the risk of that being, disrupted or not being a business in say 5 to 10 years? And then the third thing I'm looking for is, can this business actually scale? As in, is it a scalable business model? So, can raise capital, can really go for it. It's got a global market, or at least an Australasian market, so that we can actually scale the business. And probably the last thing there is, like, not a lot of owners think about this, but how will this business be acquired? How will it be acquired? How will we get it ready to sell? How would we, is it ever going to be attractive for someone to want to buy it? Or is it ever going to be attractive, even if we don't want to sell it, that someone would maybe offer us to obviously buy it? Because it's all well and good saying, oh, I own 50% of this company or 20% of this company, but if you can never crystallize that investment, or you can never actually, get a transaction away, then really owning equity doesn't mean anything, right? You've got to be able to crystallize the asset and crystallize the investment.
All right, curveball question, because I didn't tell you about this one in advance. When it comes to investment, because it's something that people have, particularly with the platform I'm building at the moment, that I told you about yesterday, people have been like, why don't you look for investment and things like that? But I mean, obviously you get money, but what does that actually mean? Like, do they get a big share? Like, do you
Okay.
have
Well,
to go to board meetings? Like,
yeah, that's a huge question. I mean, normally when I answer this, I'll do like last month's Leaders Club was on capital raising, right? And I mean, God, we spoke for like 10 hours, and I didn't even scratch the surface. So I'll try and answer that in a really succinct way. So the first thing is, whenever you're raising capital in a company, first of all, the money doesn't go to you as the founder or the business owner. The money gets injected into the company. So that's the first thing, right? So let's pretend you were raising money and you had a valuation of, let's say you put a value on your idea or your business of $1 million, yeah? And somebody said, hey, I want 30% of that business. You would go, okay, perfect. So to have 30% of it, it's going to cost you 300 grand. So the investor gives you 300 grand. That 300,000 gets injected into the business as your working capital. They're issued their 30%, and you're issued your 70%. So now you obviously have a business partner. That can't be reversed, unless there's a share sale or something like that. So you're now in business with another person. Now, there's lots to talk about on this subject, but that would mean you now own 70% of your idea or your business or your asset, and you've got an investor there as well. They might want to have a seat on the board as a director for having that much of a stake in the company. And then, of course, from there, you then go, okay, now I've got 300K to really drive the growth of this business. So from an investor's standpoint, they're going, well, I've invested 300,000 and the value of the company was $1 million. So my 30% is worth 300,000. The goal is to make their 30% and your 70% worth more, right? So let's say in 5 years' time, it's worth 10 million. So their 300,000 that they put in is worth 3 million, and your 70% is worth 7 million, right? Now it's only worth that if someone wants to buy it, or it gets acquired, or there's a transaction that takes place. So there's a couple of things here. The first thing is don't raise capital just because you want to raise capital, because it's kind of a cool and sexy thing to do, right? Yeah. Raise capital because money is the only thing stopping you from growing. So as in, you've got an awesome business model, it's ready to go, the market loves it, and if you just had a little bit more money, it would literally pop. That is a good time to raise, because otherwise you've got a business where you're just using that capital raise to pay for the bills and you're not actually increasing the value of it. So that's an important thing to remember. And then probably another thing there is, it's like, just because you get an investor on board, it doesn't mean they control your company. Okay. Yeah. So there's a thing in every company, every company that raises capital should have a thing called a shareholders agreement. That sits under the company and is governed by the company's constitution without getting too kind of legal. That governs the company, or the rules of the company. So in that shareholders agreement, that will say, how things are voted on, when dividends are issued, who gets the say, how many votes each person has, to make big decisions, etc. So if you wanted to, and my advice to most founders is, in that shareholders agreement, you can protect yourself really, really well, so that even if you owned less than 50% of the company, you would still have an element of control. This is called a negative controlling share. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this, but it's like, just because you raise capital doesn't mean you're going to be successful. And also, just because you raise capital, it doesn't mean that you are going to lose control of your company either.
Perfect. Yeah, it's always given me a little bit of anxiety, because I had God forbid, a web developer try and take a share in one of my projects, and he just didn't do any work. It was really annoying.
It's like, if you're, if someone's giving you cash, then they give you the cash and that's all they give you. But if you're getting what's called smart money, which is almost what Business Leaders Group does, it's like, here, I'll give you the cash, but I'll also sit on your board and work with you and make sure that we scale this thing, right? And it actually works. So if you are getting, smart money, or sometimes people just want smart and not the money. So if you just want, say you give a 20% stake in your company to get, a business person on board, like they might on Shark Tank, etc. You've got to make sure that that person who's having that 20% has clear KPIs and deliverables for what that 20% is for. And you want to make sure that that's over a time period as well. So that way, you're all on the same page. But my final comment on this is a big lesson I learned early on was I would rather own 20% of $1 billion company than 100% of nothing.
Yes. Yeah, that's very true. Okay.
So
Yeah,
to give you
that's
just a couple of little facts there. So Mark Zuckerberg only owns 17% of Facebook.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, he's still probably like the richest person ever.
Of course, right? Of course.
Yeah. All right. So what are some of your top tips for a company who's looking to go for growth?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, like I said before, make sure you're spending your, 80% of your time on revenue generating activities. That is, that's critical. The second thing I would say is, if you can set up an advisory board, set up some great people around you, so that they can actually help you drive through that growth. The third thing there is make sure you've got a product to market fit. Like what that means is you've got to understand your market really well, as in who you're selling to, who you're delivering to, who you're servicing, and your product has to meet their needs really well, right? It's like if you are, if your product or service is an online fitness platform, that consists of really heavy deadlifts and like bodybuilding style workouts, but you're pitching that to, 80-year-old ladies who enjoy gardening, there is not a product to market fit, right? So it's like, you've got to make sure there is a solid product to market fit with whatever you are delivering. So understand your market, know your market intricately, know what they want, what they need, what they fear, what they frustrate, what their dreams are, all that stuff. So understand them so you know how to deliver your product to them, so you know exactly what they want, and then you can deliver on that.
Perfect. And I know I should usually ask this question at the start, but obviously I did a bit of research on you over the past week. I noticed you dropped out of high school quite early at like 16, and then by 2015 you were named as one of the top 3 business leaders to watch in Fairfax. Can you tell me a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, of course. Well, it's a long story, but I'll try and condense it. For me, I didn't finish high school. I'm that typical kind of high school dropout. And yeah, I don't know. I think when I was younger, I read a lot of kind of business books, and I remember reading Richard Branson's book, his first one that he put out, which is I think it was losing your virginity, I think it was.
I think I've seen that one. Read that one.
And it was just, this is sort of 15, 16 years ago, and it was just, I think I just had this kind of aha moment, without sounding too cliche, that, well, hey, if I want to like be in business and follow that kind of entrepreneurial dream, like school's probably, not really something that's important, and then I started doing a bit more research into it, with my parents, and when I discovered that, something like 65% of Australia's CEOs don't have a university degree, I was like, okay, this now makes sense. And my father was in business, and he didn't go to uni, and I kind of just put 2 and 2 together and went, well, like if a lot of these self-made entrepreneurs and a lot of these guys like don't kind of follow the traditional route, then that's not really what I want to do either. So, obviously I'm in a very different headspace to now to then, but, I guess I was a young guy and moved out of home, and, I didn't really know what I was going to do, and, I didn't have any money. I was living in a car for a little while, which was fun, but it's all part of the journey. And then, the journey kind of started from there. I, got a job in sales, and, started that, and did really well. And then I got into the fitness industry, and, started a couple of gyms, and started buying property, and, then, and then invested in and started the Entourage journey. The Entourage was, probably my first home run. So, I was involved with that when we had 5 people in a shared office in York Street, and invested all the money I had at the time, which was 278,000 into the Entourage. And,
Wow.
over the kind of three or 4 years I was there, we grew that from 5 staff to 100 staff. I was the GM of that company with 90 staff and 8 executives reporting to me, and that was an incredibly successful business, and I mean they're still running today. And Business
A
Leaders
lot of
Group
my
is
friends are on it.
the Business
Yeah.
Leaders Group is still the 3rd largest shareholder in the Entourage today. So, that was, I guess, what kind of started the Business Leaders Group, kind of journey, right? That was our first kind of company that came under that banner. And then there was the Unfiltered story. So I invested in a company called Unfiltered, moved to New Zealand, launched that in New York and San Fran. We exited out of that company. That was an online media business. Then from there was Zen Now, which is a tech startup. Then there was Fitstop. So I guess it all just started kind of coming together. And for me, for the first, for the first kind of 10 years of my career, it was just about getting runs on the board, building some companies, having some runs on the board so that I could actually launch an investment and an advisory firm to go, you know what, I've actually had the experience. Here's the companies that we've started, brought, sold, invested in, scaled, etc. And now only, kind of the last 12 to 24 months, have I almost felt like I've had permission to be able to tell the world, this is what we've done, this is what we do, these are the companies under our banner, this is who we help, etc. So, it's kind of funny. You probably couldn't map out the journey if you tried to plan it, but for me, the vision has always been the same, and that is to run an investment and an advisory firm where all day, every day, I work with companies, build companies, start companies, invest in companies, and that's kind of my world now. That's what I do, kind of full time. There's nothing else.
That's awesome. And because I'm a publicist, I mean, you obviously got ranked in the top 3 in Fairfax to watch. Were there any really good outcomes for you as a result of being featured in that piece?
Yeah, there was. I mean, obviously at the time when it was published, there was a lot of media and a lot of interviews, and I guess that put me on the map a little bit, in a weird way. But I've never really been a media guy, to be honest. I've always been like even the tagline. No. The tagline for Business Leaders Group is "Let results be the voice," right? So I've always wanted to let my companies do the talking, So whether it's the Entourage or the Fitstops or Unfiltered, or I've always wanted to let their brand speak and be known as the business guy who was kind of behind that. But I think now, is I finally got comfortable with the fact, and I'm doing a lot more interviews and being featured a lot more, and I think I'm ready now. I think I'm ready now. I'm a lot more mature than I was probably at 20. I'm level now, and I'm ready to be able to I guess tell my story, and and help other people with their companies, and I think I'm in a good place. Maybe at 20 I probably wouldn't have been the best guy for the media.
Yeah. Well, I guess building every company would your approach would be different. So it probably takes a little bit of building various different sort of assets up in order to know what to say.
Oh, of course, right. And I think, like, honestly, the last 10 years I've been building businesses. That's what I've been doing. I've been flying around the world, building businesses, taking risks, learning. Only now have I had a bit of space to go, "Whew, that was pretty fast," and here we are. I'm not the guy to spend so much time on media and content, and I've been building companies, and I think that's the difference. It's like when you're focused on building companies and managing staff and sitting on boards and dealing with pressure and all that kind of stuff, like I've been the real deal, and I say that with so much humility, but that's just the facts of what I've been doing. So I haven't had time to, I guess, build a brand. It's just been by default.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's something to be said for, you know, getting everything organically anyway, because I like the whole let the results do the talking. But yeah, I think you've achieved enough now that you've got, you know, lots of other people could probably benefit from reading your articles. And if my website
Yeah.
ever launches, you can use that to write them.
And no, of course, and I actually agree with that. There's almost I think there's a good I think there's a good amount of, I guess, lessons and you know, screw ups and successes and all that stuff that I can actually share, and I will always do that now. And you know, I think that's probably an obligation for anyone in business who either has you know, a failure or success, or does stuff well, or, you know, to be able to share that with young business leaders coming through, because that's how we learn.
Yeah, well, feel free to not answer this, but because I'm a negatively inclined person, can you tell us about one of the failures and what you learned from it?
Yeah, of course. There was a this is a good one actually. There was a company in New Zealand. I won't say the company. It was a digital marketing firm. Invested well over six figures into the business, and it had a really good start. You know, it went from 0 to 2 million in revenue in under 18 months. You know, got listed as one of the fastest growing tech companies in New Zealand, all the awards, all the accolades, etc. And 2 years in, it just kind of stopped. And, you know, it just kind of, it fell over. And you know, for me, I was like, wow, what happened there? And, you know, there's a little bit of ego involved, you know, from the founders and the board. You know, there was probably a lack of structure in the company. We tried to launch too early, so it started in New Zealand. We tried to launch in Australia too early when we weren't ready. You know, there was a number of things that went wrong with that business, and the reality of it is, the investment was lost, and our firm lost, you know, a couple of $100,000 or more in that investment, right? Like that's the game. You know, I can't. I don't expect 10 out of 10 companies to work, right? Because ultimately you can do your best, but hey, I've had failures like everyone, and you learn from those failures, you know, and they humble you. But you just, hopefully you have more wins than more wins than you do losses.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I would love 600K to play in my business, but I'd just be so stressed about playing with someone else's money. Like, yeah, it's a thing. Anyway, do you have any last parting tips before we end the interview?
I just want to say thank you for taking the time, and you know, I hope that your audience has has got some value from this, and I guess just a little bit of final advice for the business leaders out there, guys. Like, hey, I know it's a tough time. I'm not dismissing that. I know it's a tough time for all of us. You know, we're in this together. You know, make sure that you're looking at the opportunities in the market. Some examples of that are media buying right now has never been so cheap, whether it's offline or online. You know, it's 40 to 50%, you know, cheaper than it's ever been, you know, whether that's clicks or billboards or radio advertising or TV advertising. You know, so yeah, guys, I encourage you to take advantage of the opportunities out there. You know, some other opportunities are, I think this is a phenomenal time for you to be able to actually win customer loyalty. Right now, treat your customers well, treat them with love, treat them with respect. You know, talk with them about how you can still stay engaged. Just give value to them and stay engaged with them, even if they can't afford to pay you right now. We've never had a better time in history to be able to show your clients and your customers loyalty. To give you an example, Leaders Club right now is completely free for all of my clients, because I just want to let them know that I'm here, I'm with them. So this is an amazing time to develop customer loyalty. And then the third time is, the third thing is, this is a good time for you to stop and reflect and be calm and look at your business model and look at your structure and look at how things are working, and take the time to do this, because rarely do we rarely do we get, rarely do we get the downtime that we have now, so use this time to challenge your current business model and look how you can pivot or build systems better, et cetera, right? So that's kind of my message. And I think the world's going to come out of this a better place, right? Now, I'm not because I'm, completely oblivious to what's happening. I just think that we're going to come out of this a little bit more humble. We're going to come out of this a little bit more connected. We're going to come out of this looking after people better and, not trying to climb on top of each other. And I think that's a good thing, because this situation, regardless of, money or status or who you are or what you have, I think we're all in it together. And I think the world is going to come out of this, even though we're not connected physically. I think the world is going to come out of this so much more connected and a nicer place to be. So wish you all love, and hope everybody is doing incredible out there. And hey, if anyone needs to reach out or has any questions for me, I'm completely obligation free. I'm happy to answer and help, because I know this is a challenging time for everyone.
Cool. Thank you so much, Rich. I really appreciate you coming on. And honestly, I got a lot of value out of that interview, so I really hope everyone else does too. But I will record the interview on my phone, because I don't know how to save an Instagram TV, and then I'll re-upload it onto Instagram TV and YouTube and everything if everyone wants to watch the full interview.
Yeah, cool. Great. Hey, thanks so much for your time, Britt. Take care. Bye.